at the time, like I didn't have this like, oh my God, my world is over. I can't do anything in my life anymore. Right. It was like, okay, football is done. Now let me separate myself from that. That's not who I am anymore. Right. I'm Jaelan Phillips. I'm a musician. I'm whatever else I was at the time. And so I just poured myself into that.
Leader of the lions, pick of the litter. Against the strongest, I'm alive and remain a victor. My battle scars that show that I am far from a quitter. Went through it all and I'm still striving, that makes me a winner. When it's me versus the globe, with my back to the wall, when at my lowest of lows. Still I put up a brawl, was never in me to fold, never in me to fall. So when my story is told, they'll say I gave it my all.
Welcome back to the Next Chapter podcast. I am so excited today. This is a young man I met a few years ago and was blessed to have the opportunity to actually invite him into my home when he got drafted. If you remember that, JP.
Of course I remember.
He came over with his girlfriend and he needed somewhere to stay, and we were going out of town. I said, hey, man, just come over to the house and make it yours, and taught you how to use the coffee machine and all that stuff. But
still didn't use it right.
Still didn't use it right. He said stuff went all over the place. We had to clean up our place. There's coffee
machine was raggedy.
No, it was too fancy. That was the problem.
It was one of them like stamp puck ones or the espresso machines. You got to get right.
You know he got one at the
Caleb
crib
got a little bougie in him now. Come on,
a little bit. But man, like came down. Really connected with you, JP, like on a real level, like intimate level, as we got to know each other as you, went through your rookie year, man. Obviously a lot of conversations, but I just respect the type of person you are, what you're looking to accomplish on and off the field. I've never seen it in a long time. In my 13 years, the mentality you have and your vulnerability, meaning I don't have all the answers, right? There's a humbleness about you that I thoroughly respect, man. But I just wanted to welcome you to the Next Chapter podcast, man. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, bro. When you invited me, I had to come. Absolutely, man. I've been so proud of what you guys are doing, man. So excited to see you guys take that leap of faith, man. Bet on yourself and do things, man. It's really incredible. So, I had to come through, hang out with my guys.
My guy. Well, one thing we wanted to jump into, JP, is just like when we talk about, Next Chapter, we obviously have had a lot of previous chapters, right? And I think it's important for people to know who you are, like intimately, and what values and characteristics were built inside you at a young age, right? So tell people, give a little rewind in terms of where you grew up, how you grew up, and how it shaped you.
Yeah, so I grew up in Redlands, California, pretty small city, about an hour outside of LA. Both my parents grew up Seventh-day Adventists, so big into faith. They didn't grow us up as Seventh-day Adventists just because the way the rules go, like sports and stuff, you couldn't do stuff on Saturday. But we still grew up in the church, grew up with real good Christian values. It's me and my sister. We're 18 months apart. She's at Harvard right now, so clearly my parents did something right.
No pressure.
Yeah, for real. But man, just a real quiet upbringing, man. Just super blessed, man. I had two parents who really just loved the hell out of me, man, unconditionally. So they were hard on me, don't get me wrong. My mom was the assistant superintendent of the school district, and I was
no games.
I was a little badass kid too. So when I was getting in trouble in school, man, she was quick to put that foot down, man. But so I grew up with a lot of good authority, but loving authority, not just overbearing and just yelling at you for no reason. Like, I really had a great example of what it was like to be a loving person and a parent.
Absolutely, man. Tough love.
For sure.
Well, and the respect that it's created, right? They say that the best parenting style is the authoritative style, not the authoritarian or the permissive. And the authoritative is high in standards and expectations and high in love. And it sounds like that's what you experienced.
Like my mom and my dad too, especially my mama.
Who was more the disciplinarian, mom or dad? It started to sound like it was mom.
My dad, so my dad's an attorney, and the way he's wired, he's just so logically thinking and very, breaking things down. He doesn't get very too emotional about anything. But my mom is super emotional. And so it was nice to have both of that though, because my dad really instilled in me like being able to process things and not just let your emotions, rule you, especially when it comes to like anxiety and stress and worrying about things. Like from a young age, he taught me about controlling the controllable. And that's something I didn't even really understand until more recently when you hear it from coaches, you hear it and you see it in real life. But he's always instilled that in me. So I really had the best of both worlds, honestly.
So if you were going to have a sleepover and you're like, man, who the hell do I ask? Because I don't, who are you going to at a young age? You're like, yo, I want to sleep over this, but I don't know if Who were you going to go to?
I'm going to Pops, and he said, "Go ask your mom." You know how that goes, man.
Son, don't put me in this position, man. Like, look,
No,
you already
no.
I've been cooling over here.
You see, right over there, go. So obviously raised, and I got to know your parents. By the way, I respect the shit out of both of them and what they've done to raise you guys in a family that actually, just getting to know them. I could see what you just said, and I got to know them. I'm like, yeah, that's them. Like 100% that's them. But as you grow up, right, and tell us about how you started to get involved in football. How did you get involved? Did you play other sports? When did football become that love that you were like, man, this is something I could really thrive in?
So I played baseball and football were my two main sports growing up. During baseball season, I wanted to be a baseball player. During football season, I wanted to be a football player. And I played travel ball baseball too, so I was really doing both at the same time for the majority of the year. Played a little bit of basketball. I was never into hoops, which is crazy because, I guess 6'5" isn't even that tall in the league, but when everybody sees me, they're like, "Oh, you hoop, you hoop?"
It is
I'm
when
like,
you're
"All
young,
right, bro." So never really played basketball growing up, but was really competitive in football and baseball. And baseball was, like I said, travel ball and a really good travel ball team, all-stars every year, things like that. So coming into high school, I knew I wanted to play baseball, I knew I wanted to play football, and then running track as well, just because, speed training and stuff like that.
What'd you run in track? Let everybody know.
I was an anchor on the 4x1, man.
Excuse
Come
me?
on. Anchor on the 4x1. All 6'5", 240 of me at the time.
What was you running?
I wasn't running personally. I don't even know what my team was running, bro. To be honest, so we did pretty good in like CBL, sectional, stuff like that. But once we got to the CIF, bro, I remember we had our race. My team's doing good, and I get the baton and I take off, bro. And I feel like nobody's around me. Everybody starts passing me. I'm like, okay, clearly I'm not cut out for this.
Yeah, no doubt. You mean that when you were 240 on the track, you didn't realize
exactly.
I
It's
can keep
just
up with these
physics at
dudes.
that point.
Look at this pencil passing me.
Yep.
Yeah, but so played baseball and football, track in high school. Was playing baseball, so I was on my freshman team the freshman year, and then sophomore I got pulled up to varsity. So I was still playing pretty competitively. I was a DH, so I wasn't like really in it. But that sophomore year, coming into my junior year, is when I went to my first football camp, and so that was at the University of Redlands, the local school, and the University of Washington offered me at that point. And it was funny because I was going as a tight end. Like I didn't even have like a position or anything.
What position when you were a kid, what positions were you playing in football?
I was a running back first. LT, LaDainian Thompson was my idol growing up, bro. I wanted to be just like him.
Were you not so tall? Like what? Like they just put you at running back? At what age were you playing running back?
Like 7 years old. 7 to probably 10 or 11, and then I got a little pudgier when I was a little kid, so I wasn't playing running back anymore. I was playing more like defensive end, funny enough, and I didn't even think I played offense at that point. And then freshman year, leaned out a bunch, was still short, but then I shot up after that. So then coming into my sophomore year, I was probably like 6'4", still skinny, probably like 210 or something like that. So I was playing outside linebacker in football, but I still wanted to move to safety or wanted to move to wide receiver. I didn't know what I wanted. My coach was like, bro, just play outside linebacker. Like, I promise you that's the one for you. So went to the camp, like I said, funny enough, playing tight end, but got the offer. And at that point, I was like, it's curtains. I'm playing football. Like, no more baseball, nothing. I'm just going to focus all on football. And then I played a little bit of volleyball when I was in high school too, because my defensive line coach was the volleyball coach. So that was more just
no judgment, respect. I played it too.
There we go. Yeah. I wasn't very good, but it was fun. We had a good time.
Heck yeah!
I can't believe you played running back. I'm just trying
I was
to
getting
imagine.
after it
I'm
too,
just
right?
trying to imagine him back there, but obviously he was shorter back then. But that had to be a good sight.
I was getting after it. I got some clips.
Was it
LT?
Was it tackle?
Yeah, it's tackle.
Okay.
It's tackle. I've been playing tackle football since back when I was growing up. We didn't really have flag football like that.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, that's all the young kids play flag football, which is honestly probably better.
Yeah.
But,
7-on-7 leagues.
I was
There were
glad.
7-on-7 leagues. You'd probably still be a wide receiver.
Probably, low key. I still think I can play wide receiver, so don't get me started because I'll go over to Mike McDaniel right now and tell him to put me in. So
I believe it. I believe it. I used to always say I could play DN. I used to be like, can you give me, if all the D line is tired at the end of the game and it's a third down, just let me rush one time. It never happened.
That's a good thing. We remember your story from the other day, just about standing straight up when you first played tight end.
I was
Get
bad.
knocked by that D-end.
That was bad.
He was the one knocking you back, by the way. So as you started to play these high school sports, when did the interest of kind of your athletic ability take the next leap, right? When did people start noticing, hey, JP may be a guy? Like, when did that happen?
it didn't happen until right before my junior year. I didn't go to any camps or anything like that my freshman and sophomore year, so I really wasn't on the map at all. I was unranked. Maybe even coming after my junior year. I think I got a little bit of attention during the season because I was balling. I was doing my thing junior year. But then the summer coming into my senior year, that's when I really started to hit the camps, going to the Nike opening, the Rivals 5-Star Challenge, stuff like this. And I had never even rushed a passer before other than, in football and stuff. And I wasn't even a pass rushing outside backer as much as I was dropping and stuff like that in coverage. So I remember my first camp that I went to was the Nike opening regionals. And my high school coach didn't even want me to go at the time because the finals is like during summer practice or whatever. So I'm like, screw that, I'm going, whatever. I want to go see what my chops are. I get there and I ended up getting the camp MVP gold letter invite to the finals. So that was like the first moment. That was so wild to me, bro, because like I said, that was the first time ever doing one-on-ones. I had never done one-on-ones before, anything like that. Real anxious, real scared to get out there. There's, hundreds of kids around, college scouts, stuff like that. So ended up, like I said, doing real well in the regionals, got invited to the finals. And then when the finals came around, I was top 5 in that, didn't get the MVP, was like one of the top ones. Same thing with the 5-Star Challenge. So that's when people really started to blow my name up and talk about me. So I went from being unranked before my senior year to coming into the senior year, I was like maybe top 20 in my position. And then by the end of the senior year, I early enrollee to UCLA, but they ended up ranking me number 1 in the country. So that was nuts. That was really nuts.
Sheesh. The rise to the top happened quickly.
Real quickly.
Sheesh.
And literally like less than a year.
So what did that moment where you were, nobody's paying attention to me, boom, here I am, blow it out your senior year in terms of just like killing it. Number 1 recruit, I believe, in the nation, right? Like in the nation, everybody. What was that phase like for you and kind of what did you learn through that process?
I don't even know, man. I didn't even really soak it all in. I didn't really process it because, like I said, I was an early enrollee. So I was already at UCLA when they came out with the final rankings that I was number 1 in the country.
So you were there in January,
yeah.
Wow.
And they came out with the final rankings, like February or something like that. So I was I had a lot of confidence, you know what I'm saying? I was riding my high horse. I was never like a super egotistical or bragging on myself type person, but, it's kind of hard not to get a little gassed up when number 1 in the number 1 recruit in the country, and then going to UCLA. It's basically my hometown, essentially. My dad went to UCLA, mom went there, so been a Bruin my whole life. So I was really on top of the world, bro. Feeling so good. Just everything in my life was perfect at that point.
I want to tap into your headspace because that's I have so much interest in really this first transition from being unknown to notoriety. At the beginning of that summer, you said nobody really knew who Jaelan Phillips was. What were your thoughts about what your life was going to be like in the future, right? So if, you didn't have that much love from colleges, but what were you thinking you want to do? Were you thinking, I want to be a pro football player? Or were you thinking, I want to get to college and I want to follow my dad's path or my mom's path? What was your headspace like as that junior or finishing up that junior year?
I wanted to go to Stanford and just be an academic. I don't know if I ever wanted to be a lawyer. When I was young, I kind of did a little bit, be like my pops, but in high school, I didn't even really too much think about. I definitely didn't think about playing professional sports before I started getting interest like that. I've always been super passionate about sports, but to me, like I said, my mom's the assistant superintendent of the school district. My dad's an attorney, so the academic side was always instilled in me. I had a 4 or 5 GPA coming out of high school. Stanford was my second choice. Like I really wanted to go to Stanford because from a young kid, I wanted to go there just on some academic shit. And so, at that time, didn't really have much plans for the future. Just knew I wanted to go to college and get an education and, the whole 9.
And then then you go into this senior summer, you start balling, you're doing your thing. It happens so fast. You're early enrolled, you're in UCLA. You find out you're the number 1 ranked player in your class. Then what's your headspace? Is all of a sudden, did you shift from, I really see myself as this academic, but now I want to be a great college player or a pro? Did you want to do both? Did you feel like you had to compartmentalize one?
At that point, I thought I was going to be the number 1 draft pick in the NFL in 3 years.
That's what I'm talking
about.
Let me know where that headspace.
No, for real. That's what it was. And especially just, and back when I was in high school, I was really reading into what the blogs and what the, all these analysts and stuff were saying. And everybody across the board is like, this is the guy. Like, this is the future of UCLA. This is the next great pass rushers, stuff like that. And so I just kind of internalized that. That just became like, all right, that's what's going to happen. Like I had never faced adversity before that, really at all, like in my whole life. Like I said, grew up, both parents, amazing, present, well off, in a great community. Everything was good for me. So I really didn't even think anything bad could happen.
So as you were going through that, right, like we know there's a little bit of pain to the purpose, right? And talk a little bit about your experiences. As JT said, you're going in there, all these people are saying these things. You want to live up to the expectations, right, of yourself, but also this like, yeah, I got to be that guy. I'm going to be that guy. Talk us through the journey of like UCLA and what you learned through that.
So, man, when I first started at UCLA, I was that guy. You know what I'm saying? I came in as a freshman, early enrollee. I was the number one, like we had our off-season lift program or whatever. There's like a Bruin Challenge. I was the number one Bruin Challenge as a freshman, like with all the seniors, everything.
But so what's the Bruin Challenge?
It was like you'd set PRs or whatever. You'd set goals for all the different lifts. And if you got the lift, then you got that point. And whoever had the most cumulative points at the end, like won the Bruin Challenge, basically.
You outlifted everybody as a true freshman?
That's crazy.
Everybody.
At UCLA? Okay, I just made to make sure that I was
in the spring.
This was when I first got in there, bro.
Okay, now
like
continue.
Before spring ball.
Wow.
So then spring ball rolls around. Man, you know how college football is. That shit ain't no joke. Right. So this is the first time. Like I worked really hard in high school. I always grinded, but it was pretty easy for me, honestly. I was just bigger and more athletic than everybody. So I had 21 sacks my senior year, just doing no moves, like just doing shit. And so that first spring ball was definitely like an eye opener. And I had a couple of little injuries and stuff, and I'm just like, man, like this is real life. You feel me? This is a lot different than what high school was. But shit was still really smooth at that point. I'm thriving socially. I'm making friends. I'm independent for the first time in my life. Like I said, my mom wasn't overbearing, but she's a figure in the community. So I always had eyes on me. I always kind of was in this box. Yeah. So this is the first time that I was outside of that box. So I was thriving, man. Some of the best experiences in my life that first year at UCLA. Ton of memories. But season comes around, shit was going really well. I'm starting as a true freshman. Like I said, people were literally saying like, he's the next Anthony Barr. If you know what Anthony Barr is, like he's the future for UCLA. So honestly, at that time, I remember the first game. So we played Texas A&M the first game. It was the second biggest comeback in NCAA history. And I ended up getting a sack and a half and, got a sack on that last drive to kind of secure the game and stuff. So I'm still riding my high horse, but this is the first time I started to really feel pressure. Like I remember I wrote it down. Like I have in my notes in my phone, like I wrote this whole letter where I was just talking about the pressure that I was feeling from the fans, from my parents, from just all the expectations that I had for myself and that everybody had for me. But I was still handling it pretty well at the time, especially because things were going well. Like I just balled out my first game, like shit's going good. And then second game, we go to Memphis and I got a really, really bad high ankle sprain, like, third, fourth play in the game. So that was like the first time in my whole entire athletic career that I had gotten injured. Like I didn't get injured at all growing up. So that was just really tough for me because that was the first time I felt the alienation of being injured. And, you guys know as athletes, like you're just outside of the whole process of what's going on in the facility. Like everybody basically continues without you. Like you are stuck in rehab. You're stuck at home when the team's traveling and stuff like that. So, at this time, my social habits weren't great. Like I was thriving, but I was in college. I was partying. I was, carrying on. So when that started, when I got hurt and I wasn't playing as much, that obviously started to ramp up some because I have all this idle time and I was just bullshitting with my friends and people I thought were my friends, but really just wanted to be around me because I was Jaelan Phillips and all that. So I'm getting into some bad shit, whatever. So that year goes on. I ended up getting a concussion through the year, maybe like game 7, and then got another ankle sprain once I came back from this ankle sprain. So freshman year was basically a bust. Like nothing, I played in 7 games total, had some decent stats, but, really didn't do great. Coach ends up getting fired at the end of the year. So honestly, at that point, I was like, man, this is a perfect time for me to refresh. This is a perfect time to come in, make a great impression with this new coach and just, handle business. I'm feeling healthy, I'm feeling good. So 2018 rolls around. That's my sophomore year. Chip Kelly comes in. He's a new coach. Chip Kelly, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about him, but I also will say that he just isn't a very personable person when it comes to like really taking care of his players and really having a personal connection. Like Jim Mora, my mom still texts him to this day. That's the type of person he is. Like I had a really deep connection with him and all the position coaches and area coaches and stuff like that were recruiting me. So when Chip Kelly came in, he cleaned house. And so now it's okay, I'm trying to make a good first impression. First week he's there, I get in a car accident and break my wrist. I ended up having 3 surgeries on it and stuff. But so I couldn't even make that first impression because I wasn't with the team. I wasn't, doing stuff like that. At the time, like I said, social life still kind of, doing what I was doing. And that was affecting my mental health more than I realized at the time. Like I started getting so overwhelmed and I was hurt and just nothing was going right. And so I was attaching all that to football. I was like, man, this football shit isn't it. Like I just keep getting hurt. This is not going to be my life. I'm not finding any joy out of it anymore. And so every day I was waking up just dreading going to the facility, like absolutely awful. And I just didn't know how to process that at all. So it was honestly like this cycle of like just, negative habits. And then I'm feeling shitty because I know I'm not living right, but then I cope with that with negative habits. And it's just a cycle. And so just really in a bad headspace at this time. And like I said, I didn't have that closeness with the coaches where they could really take care of me. Mind you, I'm still 18 at this point because early enrollee, like young, I'm away from my parents and I was really pushing them away because I was ashamed at some point and just didn't really want to talk to them and stuff. And so man, it was just a lot going on at the time. I didn't know how to process it back then. And so that carried on throughout the whole summer. Came back from my wrist injury real early after like 4 months when in reality it probably should have been like an 8 to 12 month. Like they took 3 bones out of my wrist. Like it was a really major surgery.
I mean, that's a traumatic fucking accident.
100%, yeah. And like still didn't know how to deal with that, didn't know how to cope with anything. And so yeah, man, coming into the actual season, like I already had all these negative feelings with football. My roommate had just medically retired. He was my best friend in the whole world at the time. Like him and I were inseparable. So he medically retired. So now I'm really feeling alone. I'm like, fuck, bro, like everything is just going bad. I need to get out of here. Like I need to just stop doing this shit. And so ended up playing 3 games my sophomore year, and then the 4th game I get a concussion. And so at the time, the way concussion research was going, and UCLA is basically forefront of all that stuff. So the doctors were like, all right, this is your 3rd concussion in your lifetime. Like, we think you should stop playing. So for me at the time, honestly, that was perfect because all I needed was that excuse. I felt trapped for so long. That's what it was, really. Yeah. I felt so trapped because I was like, football is everything for me. It's my identity. This is supposed to be my future. This is what everybody knows me as, but I hate it every single day. I'm just dreading this shit. So I felt really trapped. And so when that doctor said you should medically retire, that opened that up. Yep. I was like, all right, that's the excuse basically that I needed to stop playing. So I stopped playing, stayed at UCLA for a couple months, but ultimately just it really wasn't good for me to be in that environment because I was still, around those people that really weren't my friends at the time. So ultimately ended up leaving UCLA, withdrawing from school, enrolled at LACC, and got into music. And that's
explain what that is for everybody, because I think this is important. We talk about life transitions, right? You're in the thick of it, and you process all this. You're out, and then you go to where?
LACC is a community college. Yep. Community college. So this is, you got to imagine that's.
So think about this for a second. You went from the height, number 1, to a community college. Mm-hmm.
I felt the blow. It was so humbling. So humbling. Like, at the time, and the thing that saved me during the time was my passion for music. And so that's what I started getting into. When I first got hurt back in February of 2018, started recording myself, rapping in my bathroom. Quickly found out I'm not a rapper. I don't got bars like that. That's fine.
But I heard you were dope with the beats, though.
But I was dope with the beats, and I was really dope with the engineering aspect of it. That's what I fell in love with. I didn't start teaching myself how to make beats until like a year after that, but I was mixing my own tracks at the beginning, and so I started to teach myself on YouTube, and I just was like obsessed with it because at the time, like I said, football was the only thing I ever did. I didn't really have any passions, anything else outside of that. So when that got stripped away, I'm having all this idle time. Music filled that void. And so I was really fucking passionate about it. That's what I am. When I get interested in things, bro, I'm like head on. Yeah. So I'm getting into the music, teaching myself, and the learning curve, I was just exponentially growing, getting better. And so I'm like, fuck, I could really do this shit.
Yeah.
And so, but meanwhile, I'm feeling every day I'm waking up dreading going to football. But then I'm making music after practice and shit like that, and it's elevating me so much.
Yeah.
So it was this really weird balance where I just, like I said, I was like, fuck football. Like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yep.
So anyways, when I leave UCLA.
Before I let you jump to the next story, there is so much richness psychologically that I feel like we have to unpack. I mean, one of the main things is not enough people talk about what it's like to be injured. Mm-hmm. And to have injury, recover, and then have another injury. I want you to talk about that. I also noticed, right, like you've had this pattern of connection in your life. Like you said, I came from stability. I've got these meaningful relationships with my parents and my sister. And then you get to college when you're on your own for the first time, and then connection is just getting pulled away from you.
Yeah.
Then you've got these pressures of trying to live up to this thing, but then you've got this mood balance you have to have, right? And I talk so much about healthy coping and what difference that makes. And it sounds like music became that. But I guess I want to start with, you mentioned coping in unhealthy ways. Where did you learn about that? Like, how did you even start to understand coping? And then what did you learn through that?
I was seeing a therapist at the time at UCLA, team psychologist and stuff like that. So he started to be able to articulate the things that I was feeling. I didn't have a definition for what I was going through at the time. I was just in this cycle, in the midst of it. So I didn't have any education about mental health, depression, anxiety, all this shit like that. So I was anxious, I was depressed, and I had no idea why. I'm just looking at it like football is the root of all these problems. When in reality, it wasn't football at all. A lot of it was self-inflicted. A lot of it was environment. A lot of it was just happenstance, the way shit went down. But I always attached it to football when in reality, after I was able to, a couple years process everything, realize football was never the problem. You know what I mean? I just felt trapped. I felt so trapped at the time.
And I'm sure a lot of that, one of the biggest things that we talk about in mental health and when it comes to sports is really how depression can come from being injured. And you talked about what it's like to be separated from the team, to be unable to go out there and perform and show who you are. What were you feeling like in those days in the training room? And like maybe explain to like the people that watch this what that's really like to have to go through recovery after recovery.
Yeah, the first real memory that comes to mind with that was that first game after I got hurt. Team traveled up to Stanford, and I'm at, the homie's house watching a game, and I just sat in there. I remember like at halftime, I was just crying in the room. I was so upset because at the time, like I said, football was my everything. That was what people saw me as. That was my talent. I was so good at it. So I loved doing it. You know what I mean? And so when that got stripped away from me, especially something that's out of my control, and that was the first time I got injured, it just felt, there were so many feelings. It's like, why me? It's like, man, it's hard to even articulate how that shit feels because it's just like your whole world stops, essentially. And then everything moves on without you. And so the days where I'm in the training room, bro, it just gets so monotonous and so frustrating because sometimes you'll progress, sometimes you don't, sometimes you'll backtrack, like just shit happens. And so it was tough. And then especially like you said, like I came back from that ankle, was finally feeling good. Literally the next game I sprained the other ankle. So now I'm just like, bro, I can't get right. You know what I'm saying?
I can't catch a break.
Yeah, so it's so easy to get into that spiral, especially when you're alienated because being around your brothers and being around people lifts you up so much in ways you don't even really think about too much until you have that stripped away from you. And then it's just you and the trainers and your pain and your depression, all that shit. Yeah. So it was tough.
Yeah. Social support is that's what we talk about community all the time. Like that having brothers, people that you care about around you, it inoculates you. It protects you psychologically. And then getting injured is losing everything at once. Yeah. It's so sudden.
No, I look back and I'm like, I know how God has like used you and shaped you in the story through these storms, right? But like rewind a little bit now, you're making music, right? You're getting the transition about UCLA. Do I stay here? Like talk a little bit about what happened after that very quickly and how, you talked about environment. It wasn't for me. What did you do after that?
So I left UCLA, enrolled in LACC because, with my parents, they were about to let me just drop out and become a SoundCloud rapper. You feel me? Like, and also for myself, like I was so passionate about music and I didn't want to be like all the other SoundCloud rappers who just do it and that's just their hobby. Like I wanted to learn. I wanted to really like just pour myself into it and like I still wanted the academic piece of it. So when I enrolled at LACC, I was taking music business, music production, I was taking music theory classes. I was taking songwriting seminars, literally like performing in front of people at a community college. So it was eye-opening, and even little shit like me having to go and get my own schedule and talk to the academic advisor, and I'm having to drive myself to 30 minutes. I was staying in downtown LA at my dad's loft or my parents' loft, and driving 30 minutes, by myself to school. And then also at the time I'm interning at iHeartRadio. I was working at my dad's law firm for a little bit, so I had to jump into real life pretty quick. And I was still 18, 19 years old at this time. And like you said, going from this to this. So I'm just It was a mixture of, it was humbling looking back on it, but at the time it sucked. That shit was depressing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it just felt like I felt like I was a failure, and I felt like, I never felt like I wasn't gonna amount to nothing, because I knew I had the talent in music, and I knew that I could do anything I wanted to. Yeah. So I was like, all right, like, let me learn about this shit. Let me learn about the music business. Let me learn how I can really like do this for a living. And so I was, I got connections, and I was working in studios and charging people to engineer their stuff. And I was going to work my way up in the music industry. So honestly, at the time, like, I didn't have this like, oh my God, my world is over. I can't do anything in my life anymore. Right. It was like, okay, football's done. Now let me separate myself from that. That's not who I am anymore. Right. I'm Jaelan Phillips. I'm a musician. I'm whatever else I was at the time. And so I just poured myself into that. Yeah. So the transition of, the identity crisis that so many people go through after football, and like, for me, it wasn't easy, but I didn't have a prolonged identity crisis. I was able to switch the focus really quickly. And just being high achieving and the way my parents are, like I said, I wasn't gonna let myself slip like that. My parents weren't gonna let myself slip like that. So, I mean, that's kind of what I did. And so I did that for about 3 months. I was at LACC. It was like a little quarter. But during the time, my dad is telling me, he's like, man, I really think you could play football still. Like, you're so amazing at football. You're so talented. I really think you could play football still. And I'm like, fuck football. Like, I ain't doing this
I'm
shit.
not going back over there.
I don't know if you see what I'm doing on this engineering shit, but I'm at the
killing it. And mind you, my parents were both classically trained. My grandfather's a symphony conductor. My dad went to UCLA on a trumpet scholarship. My mom played the cello. They met each other in the orchestra symphony. Wow. So they didn't really understand the new generation electronic music, hip hop, shit like that. Like, my dad liked a little bit of NWA, but he's not, you feel me? He's not really game and hip to the new shit. So it was kind of separate, you know what I'm saying? But they saw that I had talent there, but my dad was like, man, I think you should play football. My mom struggled a lot during the time because, like I said, she's so emotional, and she just wanted the best for me, and she was worried about stuff. And so her and I, during the time, it was really rough for us. We were butting heads a lot because we just couldn't get right. We couldn't agree on anything. And so my dad at the time, going back to how he was stable emotionally, I think that helped me so much to this day, because me and him fought every single day. He was telling me, you should play football. I'm telling you, bro, football isn't for me. Like, I'm going into this music. This is what I'm going to do. I think you should play football. No, I think you should play football every single day for months. So, my dad's been right the majority of my life. He's a really fucking smart. He's a really smart guy. So I left the door open enough for myself that I had options. So when I left UCLA, I didn't go on Instagram and say, hey, I'm done playing football forever, whatever. I basically just said I was leaving UCLA, that my name was in the transfer portal. Like I said, keeping the door open a little bit just in case. So I was actually on a cruise. It was like December of 2019, or 2018, I guess it was. And this is before I enrolled in LACC. And like I said, on the cruise, and once we didn't have internet on the cruise, but once we got back to land, I had a bunch of texts and calls and shit from Jim Mora. And so he was saying that David Shaw from Stanford wanted to talk to me. So I'm like, man, this is a sign. Yeah. You feel me? Like, I wanted to go to Stanford in the first place. Wow. All right, let me see how I can freak this. Let me see, all right, Stanford has a music production program. So I'll go to Stanford. I'll still get the education in music, be able to use football to get the scholarship, whatever. But that was like the plan. So I was like, okay, like, let me see. So I was talking to Stanford, talking to USC, because they have a really good program backed by Dr. Dre and stuff like that. And so this is like a couple months, I'm talking to the coaches. At one point, they came down and visited me. But then really the breaking point was my roommate at the time. I lived in a house with like 5 dudes. I didn't even live there technically. I just stayed there. I like hanging out with them. But one of my homies, Chigo Zainaruka, he transferred from UCLA as a grad transfer, and he transferred to the University of Miami. And so the D-line coach at the time, Jess Simpson, came and visited him. And so when he came and visited, I was just meandering around the crib, I wasn't doing shit, but he saw me and we start chopping it up or whatever. And mind you, at this time, I'm like a shell of what I was physically. I was like 215 from 245. Like, I didn't look like a football player.
Your new workout was in the lab and music.
Oh yeah, I wasn't lifting weights. There was no weights being touched. Wow. I wasn't running, not doing anything. And my diet was bullshit. I was eating almonds for breakfast and shit like that.
I mean, that's not as bullshit as it could have been.
No, honestly, yeah, that's facts.
That's some Mickey D's though.
But so yeah, I ended up talking to him. He found out I was in the portal and figured out who I was and stuff. And so he goes back, talks to Manny Diaz, talks to Blake Baker, who's the DC, and they call me, and within a week I have an offer at the University of Miami. And so, growing up in Cali, I knew what the U was, but I didn't really know what the U was. So I started doing my research and stuff, and it turns out that they have the Frost School of Music, which is like top 5 music school in the country. So I'm like, man, this is really perfect. Basically do the same thing I was planning on doing with Stanford or SC and go over there and do that. But I still had my reservations. I really did, because whatever, it sounds good in theory, but for me, the way I'd like to tell people, it's like going through a bad breakup, right? So football was my girlfriend, my wife, whatever.
Yep.
We break up. You can't fully devote yourself to your new girlfriend if you're still talking to your ex and flirting with your ex and stuff like that. So I really tried to push football away, and I really was in that mindset that like football's not for me. I'm not doing this. Like, I'm doing music. So like I said, eventually just took my dad's advice, and I remember before I got on the plane to go to Miami, I didn't want to go. Like, I literally just like panic attack, freaking out, did not want to go. Ultimately got on the plane, took the leap of faith, and
I want to know, how big of a factor was it that your roommate was going to Miami?
It was huge, because he went out early, and so while I was still at UCLA, he got our apartment for us. Like, he had everything ready, so when I came in, I had it set for me. I had one of my main mans, like, so it worked out really well. I think that, and I didn't even I've never talked to him about it, like how much of an influence it was, like him basically bringing me over, but that was like one of the deciding factors for sure.
But that's huge, man. Like, first of all, like, okay, you grew up there. That was your backyard your whole life in Cali, right? Everything was right there. And now we're about to go across the map into an environment that's brand new. When you got there, how did your perspective shift and your love for this thing called football start showing its face a little bit more? Like, how did that transition occur, and what happened? And were you learning at this point how to deal with things and cope with things in a healthier way as of what you'd done in the past, right? Maybe some of the ways you dealt with it at UCLA when you were out in non-healthy ways.
Not at all at first. I was still on bullshit.
He said, wait, I'm in Miami. I got to get this out of my system.
But, however, there's levels to it, right? I was still coping in bad ways, but I knew coming to Miami, I'm not about to come out here and get caught up in the clubs or with girls or whatever situation. So I blocked that side out of it. It was self-medicating, stuff like that. I was still doing that. But, I went and got a girlfriend, and Morgan, I love Morgan. Like, so to this day, I've been with my girlfriend for 4 years, met her the first week in Miami, and my headset was, all right, I need to, because I was wild, dude. Like, I was really wild at UCLA. And I was so impulsive growing up, and I would just do whatever. And
when you say wild, do you think, was it like me where I had my father named Mad Dog Thornhill in the household, where if you let me out to college, because I couldn't do anything in high school, right? You let me into college, I just didn't know what to do with myself. Like, because it was a sense of freedom of like, yo, I'm out of this structure. Like, I'm gonna have some fun.
100%, 100%. But like, my parents weren't so strict that it was like, bro, I need to experience everything. I've just always been a curious person, and I like having fun. And, at the time, I've worked on this a lot, but I was a people pleaser in a sense, you know what I'm saying? I just wanted to be loved. I wanted affection, and I was getting that from certain people who were involved in certain shit that at the time, I'm 17, I'm like, all right, cool. Like, you guys are doing it, I'm doing it too. Like, so that's kind of how it was. But fast forward to the U, I was still on that, but like I said, I already had it in my head, I can't fuck up this opportunity, because this is basically a second chance in life. I really got to take advantage of it. But at first, like, it was a slow process. Like, a lot of people think that it was like, all right, boom, I went to UCLA, had all this adversity, and then I got to the U and shit was perfect. It wasn't like that at all, bro. So we get to the U, like, it took a couple of months for me to finally, because a lot of it had to do with my physical being, right? I was skinny, I was unhealthy, I wasn't working out, I wasn't eating right, all this shit. And so when I got to the U and finally got back into my diet, finally got back into my regimen and working out and doing all that, I started to get my confidence back, right? And that felt so good. It felt so good to not feel like a shell of myself anymore. I was so embarrassed and so just like self-conscious, and I still have some of that to this day from that experience, because it went from when everybody was looking at me, they're like, holy fuck, you're huge, you're Jaelan Phillips, like, you're amazing, to every time I would pull up to the facility when I was on my downhill, people were like, damn, bro, like, you getting skinny, like, what's wrong with you, type shit. People looking at me like I'm sick or like something's wrong with me. So that still, has its legs to this day, but that really helped my confidence getting back into that at the U. And so when I first got to the U, so I was in the music program, I was in the Frost School of Music, and that shit was like High School Musical, bro. Like, the way it was is all music classes. It's all
high school music.
It was nuts. It was all like it's people practicing the guitar in the hallway, and I'm having piano classes, and I'm having a digital repertoire class where it's like me and a couple other dudes on the computers, and we're doing DJ stuff and like performance. So it was nuts, bro. But ultimately, I couldn't do it with football. It was just too much at the time. But when I first got to the U, like I wasn't trying to finesse them, but I was just like, all right, whatever. I'll take the scholarship and I'm gonna use it for music. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't my headset was not in the football mindset at the time at all. So during the 2019 year, I'm working out the whole year, finally get my body back, feeling confident, and just being around it too, and then being in a better environment. Like it wasn't so much like, oh, I'm having to impress the coaches, I'm having to this and that. Like they gave me my time to get my body back and just kind of flow and get my way with the
expectations were different.
Exactly.
They weren't
real low expectations.
Be the future first round pick. Even in your own mind, the expectation was just build back, get whole healthy, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Work your way back into it. And maybe taking that pressure off allowed you to have the courage to step back into it, right? Like if we have a history of anxiety, like I'm a person that has more anxiety probably than most people. So then I'll be in my head a lot. And then I'm thinking about stuff. And so it sounds like maybe you have those same things where when the pressure came down, the expectations came down, the anxiety comes down, the focus comes back, and then you built back.
I never even thought about it like that. They had such low expectations for anything I did would have been a win because at the time, literally anything I did would have been a win.
He's stacking wins now.
You took a lot of L's and now you're stacking.
I took so many L's and like I said, I got my shit back in like pretty quickly. Like I say it was a month. It was probably more like 2-3 months, but I gained 45 pounds. Like I'm feeling myself. Granted, I wasn't lean like I was whatever. Right. But I was still like feeling good again and back in the program. But I didn't have to practice, didn't have to do any football activities, just weightlifting. So I'm like, they eased me into it. So like you said, stacking the wins started to just feel better. Like I said, still wasn't in a great headspace outside of football or whatever, just dealing with my own personal stuff, dealing with the trauma of what I had gone through. My relationship with my parents wasn't as good at the time. And so I'm having to mend a lot of things. I made a lot of mistakes. And so, it was a process, but after about a year of just continually stacking the wins and then I'm back into it. And it was really a God thing with the way how a lot of things panned out, just in terms of Greg Rousseau, who was in my position, when in 2020 when I was coming back to play and I was actually like practicing and doing stuff, Quincy Roche had transferred in, so he's a 6-year grad transfer, balled out at Temple, so he's starting. Greg Rousseau had 15 and a half sacks, second in the country the year before, so he's obviously starting. Greg Rousseau opts out right before camp, the day before camp, so now I'm starting. Right? And so literally and I get my old number back. He was number 15. I got my 15 back. I'd been 15 my whole life. Like just a bunch of weird things that were just happening in that right direction. And, I was living my life right. I started to change my habits around and just like I said, stacking the wins. And then the season came around and we only played 10 games because it was COVID. And so like this, I go from at the beginning of the year, my expectations were, all right, like I know I can get into the league because of my potential and my athleticism and all this stuff, but I was hoping maybe 3rd round, 4th round, whatever. I'll be grateful for anything. After a couple games, it's like, okay, shit, like people are telling me, bro, you might be late 1st round, early 2nd round. A couple more games, especially towards the end of the season, people are like, bro, you're going in the 1st round. So it was crazy. It was really crazy to this day, like.
How specifically, right? Like it's crazy how fast. I mean, how old were you at that time? 20?
20, yeah.
18 to 20 of what you learned, probably 17. 17 to 20 years old, specifically in this new environment. You talked about habits and having to change them. Like, what specifically did you have to have around you, and how were you processing these things mentally on and off the field to get yourself in the right mindset to go out your senior year or not senior year, but you go out that year and do what you did. Like where did that seed start at Miami and who was around you, right? Because we can't do this thing alone, obviously. Who was around you to support you and build these things back in your life?
So Coach Feely was my strength coach at the time, strength and conditioning. And man, he's a nut, but he is such a loving person and he loved me hard and he poured into me. So
Sounds familiar.
It does. Real shit. Except you're not a nut. Like
No.
It sounds bad calling him a nut. He
You
would
were
probably
talking about
agree
his
with
parents,
it.
right?
I was talking about his
Oh, I
parents.
thought you were talking about you.
That's dope.
No.
I
I was talking about your folks, my guy.
Oh, anyways.
see what
And
you're
also,
back there.
We'll get back there in a
Philly,
bit.
you're not crazy if you do see this. I love you, but you know you're intense. Anyways, so I had a support system around me, just built in within the team, within the coaches and stuff like that. But really, it was me. It sounds whatever. I'm not trying to self-suck, but for me, I realized that I was the only one who could change my actions and change the outcome of my life. Like, I feel like for so long, I was playing victim and waiting for someone to help me and waiting for someone to change shit. Until I realized that I had to develop a routine. I had to bootstrap up and take care of myself and handle business and be responsible and shit like that. I never really had to be responsible growing up. I kind of had shit handed to me.
Are you the oldest or the youngest?
I'm younger than my sister. So I was a prince growing up. Like, I didn't do shit. My mom and sister did everything for me. Like, I never had any real responsibility. So learning about responsibility the hard way, and like I said, just finally coming to that realization that I was in control of everything, it made me feel not trapped anymore because I realized I was in control, right? So I'm like, okay, let me start just really diving into my routine and diving into my workout and my diet and what I'm doing. And I started to realize that when I took care of business during the day, I could lay my head down at night without anxiety and without worry and without depression because I wasn't worried about the future and the past. None of that shit mattered. It just mattered what I was doing on a day-to-day basis and just trying to keep building and keep stacking days. And so, really figuring that out and just riding with that, honestly. And I was fortunate to not have a ton of adversity in the sense of injuries and the sense of shit like that my senior year at the U. So my process of growing like that was really pushed along and facilitated by my environment and things that were going on around me.
Yeah.
You went on a win streak. Sometimes you just need a win streak in life.
You would hit to your point, the losing and what you had to endure during those times of being win streak at the highest level, because I can't even imagine what it would be like. I couldn't handle it personally, being the number one recruit in the nation, even if I come from a two-parent house. I don't know how I would handle that at 17 years old. I really don't. And then boom, you deal with this, and then to JT's point, L again, and now you go, wait a second, I just went across the country, people that love me, different environment, expectations change. Wait, process routine, I'm starting to see it pay off. I don't have any setbacks too much, right? I'm still dealing with my internal things, boom, 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 boom. And then you get to you get to the end of the year and you're like, wait a second. Fast forward, I get drafted, by the Miami Dolphins. What was that experience like, JP, knowing how much you had endured? To your point, you had a good life, but you endured so much that I would say 99.9% of people would not have been able to overcome, and to hit the pinnacle where your name is called and you regain that position again. How did that feel for you in that moment?
Honestly, bro, it was surreal, but I've always been such a high achiever that it wasn't like I've made it. It was this is just starting. I knew I was about to get myself into plenty more expectations. And mind you, I had help from people because you remember my rookie year, how much I struggled with expectations, and just every day was just a roller coaster because I'd have a good day, coaches are feeling good. I'm like, okay, I have self-worth. I'm doing good. And then I fuck up the next day and I'm just feeling the whole weight of the world on my shoulders. So I still had a lot of that. And so I don't think I ever really, I didn't cry when I got drafted, right? It was, everybody around me was a lot more emotional than I was. My mom especially, she's like my baby, she thought she lost me for a while and she was just so happy for me. My family, everybody's so happy for me. And I was happy as hell. And I was so excited to come back to Miami. And it just added to that storybook. It was like this shit was written, bro. And it was written. But it was so wild to me over the last, year and a half, how that had unfolded. But yeah, I knew what I was getting myself into. So I'd never really took a step and was like, all right, I can lay on my haunches now, it's good. It was all right, now it's on.
How were you able to manage, and how are you now, how much you've learned, able to manage expectations better and keep a mindset that's on that growth pattern, right? Where there's going to be a little bit of ups and downs, but it's not as extreme as what it once was.
100%.
How have you been able to do that as JP? Because you were mature well beyond your years. But how do you deal with that? And how, I think this could help somebody else out in terms of how you're going to, answer this.
Man, it's a loaded question. And
It is.
And it's hard to answer too, because there's so many different things that I picked up along the way, and especially in the last 2 years of, working with different performance coaches and just like these little mantras that kind of live in the back of my head. But I mean, off the top of my head, man, I think one of the most important things for me was emotional stability. And that's something that you and I really talked about a ton my rookie year. It's just, it's almost like not taking everything so seriously. And that doesn't mean that you have less intensity or less focus. It just means that understanding that when shit's bad, all right, whatever. But it's not that bad at the end of the day. And when it's good, yeah, it's great, but don't, let that carry you. Like you have to understand, like, stuff. If you let those good days like boost you up, and that's how you hold like your value and how
your
things are going, your self-esteem and everything, then when those bad days come, then it's even worse. And so I really tried to go from here to here, where it was like, all right, there was bad days, whatever, the good days, but I'm not hanging my hat on the good days, and I'm not, killing myself over the bad days. And so like that was what carried me through my rookie year, right? And then after my rookie year, I had a really good rookie year and had some success and stuff. And so coming into my second year, my expectations were weird, because the off season I wasn't really thinking about football a ton, like just handling business, working out and stuff like that. So I thought I was smooth coming into the first game. First game happens last year, and I just had a really average performance, and I sat in the locker room or the shower and I cried for 20 minutes because I didn't realize how much I was letting the pressure and the expectations build without really dealing with it healthily. So then I was like, all right, I need to figure this out, or else I'm just going to be all over the place for my career. So I started working with a performance coach. His name is Brandon Epstein. And man, he just taught me a lot about just perspective and staying present, and just like you being in control and being the master of your own mind, and not letting your mind control and dictate your feelings and your emotions. And it's almost like, emotions coming in and just analyzing it, whatever. It's not good or bad. It's just, it is what it is, and just letting those emotions happen and then processing it and moving on. But, I think that staying present and just controlling what I can control, and there's so many different cliches, but I've learned that they're all so true. Yeah. Like all this stuff that my coach has been telling over the years, and mentors and things like that. Like I really just started to, try to embody that and really just have a perspective. So yeah, I mean, there's so many more things I could probably think about. I don't want to ramble, but that's kind of what it was. It's working and being intentional, and just understanding that I have control over what my focus is. And that's still to this day, that's something I'm working on. When my focus gets pulled and I start thinking about shit that doesn't matter, that's out of my control, I really try to pull that back in. And I've learned that it's like a muscle. It's just anything else. It's like lifting weights. Like, it's hard at first, but the more often you do it, it low-key becomes subconscious. Like, I feel myself, I still get anxious, and I still have these feelings and sad feelings and all this stuff like that. But when I feel it, I don't let that consume me, and I don't let that take over. And so I just think in general, I'm more joyous and I'm more present. And it's like, it's so much easier to just go about my business when I'm not worried about shit that doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Right.
And that's attention, right? Like this muscle of attention, and what you attend to, you're going to start relating to what you're attending to. And, there's just so much psychological richness because you're a cerebral person. And from listening to you, I'm starting to be able to understand those patterns, right? Like how huge connection is for you in life. Like you've had great connection as a child. If you don't have great connection, then it's going to be harder to go through those things that you go through. Routine, how important that is. But why? Why is routine so important? Because you grew up with a superintendent, assistant superintendent, and a lawyer. I'm sure that your every single day was constantly routined, and you have a mental appetite. Not everybody is going to have the same mental appetite as you. So that's why your mind needs things to eat outside of football. That's why when you have the music and you're like, okay, bet, like now I can dive into this, and it creates balance. And I always think about people that really have this cognitive, this cerebral hunger for what they're experiencing outside of the game. And I want to know, what are those things that you mentally allow yourself to get really interested in, or take your mind away from football, right? Like, what does that break?
My top 3 things are cars, golf, and music, honestly. And music, and it varies, right? So I get really passionate about things that whether it's new or whether, like, for whatever reason, I just have a resurgence of passion for, and I'm on it. Like, so for example, this last offseason, I didn't do any music my first 2 years in the league at all. Like, I didn't touch the music. And that was kind of because, I had to have this narrative of some coaches were worried, like, are you more interested in music than football? Whatever. So I was just like, all right, cool, whatever. I don't do music anymore, whatever. That was a phase. Let me just focus on football. But this last offseason, just realizing how much time I have and how, like you said, I need to be fed and I need to be stimulated mentally, and just doing football isn't enough. And so I got back into the music really heavy, started working with my friends who also do music, started like making beats again and mixing and doing shit. And that felt really good to get back into, man. I set up my whole studio in my house now. It hadn't been set up for the last 2 years. So that felt really good to get back into. But I'll be passionate about it for 2 weeks, and then I don't really feel like doing it the next week. And I've had to learn that it's okay to, have ebbs and flows of motivation and things like that, and not get upset where, damn, I thought I was so passionate about this, and now I don't even feel like doing it for a week. Yeah. All right, fuck it. Now I'm gonna transition to, I'm gonna golf every day for a week, or I'm gonna look at car videos and different things, and just. Yeah, so I have a ton of different passions.
That's how savants think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, not only that, like you I know you're hitting things right now because it's more relevant in the off season, but JP is a guy that gives a damn about the community, right? And young kids that are out there, is that you devote a lot of your time to building up in others. And just wanted to ask why that's even important to you, and like why I don't know if you knew this, but he's Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee for the organization, in only year 2 in the NFL. And you've been around a lot of locker rooms. That's not easy to do. So where does that come from, and what do you aspire to do by using your platform?
I think it stems from my parents and the way they brought me up. Like, one, obviously being in a Christian household and going to church and things like that. And so we did community service in my church. But then my parents also, they had tithe and they did community service and served at food pantries and always donated their time and money. And so from a young age, it was instilled in me, and I learned how important servitude was and how important it was to give back, especially to people who are less fortunate than you. And I've always been very fortunate in life, so I've always had that desire to give back to people less fortunate than I am. And so my personality in general, like whether it's my friends or family or whatever, like I'm really a giver and a provider. Like that really, it feeds my soul. I don't know why. It's in me. Like I just love providing, because I think a lot of it stems from, like I said, I really want people to love me and appreciate me and respect me. And so when it comes to my community work, I'd be remiss if I had all this money and this platform in the NFL and I just kept it all for myself. I think that's so selfish. And there's so many people that need help. And it's not even necessarily always money or always little things. Sometimes it's just pulling up to an event and hanging out with a bunch of little kids and stuff like that. It's like I started to realize that you never know what the effect you can have on somebody is, especially at a young age. And that's why I do so much stuff with kids, because I just see that as the next generation, and they're so impressionable at a young age. And if I can come in, even if I don't affect every single kid, if I can affect one kid, then I'm doing something, and I'm affecting that kid's lives. And so, for me, my community work has really been centered around kids. And so, one thing that I'm big into is working with Haley Hunt and the Verb Kind, and, providing mentorship for incarcerated youth at the juvenile detention centers down here. I've been a handful of times, brought my teammates along with me to really just chop it up with them and talk to them and tell them about my experiences and what I've learned and perspective and things like that, and just try to give them a little bit of hope. I do stuff with the Lotus House, which is, shelter for homeless women and children. And, that's usually interacting with the kids. And those are young kids, like really young. So, man, it fills me. It's something where I really feel like it's my calling and it's my duty. And I've been blessed with so much. And so I want to do everything I can to give back and to help people and bless them as well. You know what I mean? And so I think ultimately my goal with my community work is to have a foundation where I want to do everything, but I realize I have to focus my efforts on one or two main things. And so that's still a process. And, right now I basically just say yes to every opportunity the Dolphins bring to me or that I find from, outside sources, and, try to really manage my time during the season and outside of the season to make sure I'm giving back and doing those things. But yeah, I think ultimately that's my goal. And I'm really excited about it too, because I think that's so much more important than anything else I can do, on the field or really even off the field, is just making an impact and actually being, a person who does something in this life, not just a person who makes money and has a little bit of success. Like, I want to have generational impact. I want to have a legacy where, people still know who I am, decades in the future. So,
Man, amen to that. And I'll just say, when you're on that stage and receiving that Walter Payton Man of the Year award and you're the winner, I need to be in that room. Selfishly.
Trust me, you will be.
I need to be in that room, number one. But number two, man, like any way that, people listening, when you do start your own foundation, man, I'm behind it, he's behind it, we're behind it, and supporting you, whatever that mission will be for you and where you want to direct your efforts. But phenomenal journey so far, and the best is yet to come. I do know that, and I'm excited for it.
No, I've honestly been pretty floored with how dynamic you are as a person. I spend my whole day thinking about people's minds and brains and hearing your story and hearing what it means to be human, the highs, the lows, your childhood, your support system, how it all played out in your story, and how through all of that, you're still so committed to giving from you, right? And even to the point where sometimes you'll give more than you can give, and then now you're overwhelmed by it. But that kind of character is amazing. I think that what you do in football is going to be great because you have all the talent in the world, and what you're going to do after is going to be phenomenal, because I can't wait to see your mind and brain eat through what happens in the next part of your journey. I've always been a big fan of who you are. I'll be here to support you anyway, like Caleb said. I think we're all cut from that similar cloth, and I just want to continue to tell you that, man, you're going to be as awesome as you want to be in anything you want to do.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, y'all.
That's real shit. And I just appreciate your vulnerability. I really do. And it gives you so much strength. And when we start to realize that we take over in terms of being in power now, right? Because we're sharing where we are weak, and we can now be helped, right? And I think without people internalizing it and not going for help, your story is a testimony of just not only being vulnerable, but also saying, man, I don't know it all. I don't have everything. Dad, I'm listening to you now. I understand what you've been saying. I'm going to go try this. Having to be able to endure the highs and lows, how quickly you had to endure that and process all these things in a quick, I would say 4 years, let's call it, maybe even 3, is absolutely wild. How you go from here weighing 215, what'd you say?
Yeah, around 215, soaking wet,
to going across the country and dominating in a new environment. I know it brought its own challenges, to now God allowing somebody to medically, redshirt, not play, whatever that was, right? And now you're playing, and now you're drafted, and now you're like, I'm not satisfied. Dude, I want to encourage you to continue to be the steadfast leader that you are, day in and day out. Your process, people look up to you inside the building and outside the building, and any way we can support, we will always be there for you. I will always be there for you, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the Next Chapter podcast. Quite frankly, if you want to say any closing words, I'll let you say it right now before I close up shop.
Man, shout out to you guys. I really appreciate you guys for having me on here and, giving me a platform to talk about this. And I love what you guys are doing, man, just to have that authenticity and that realness to this. I think it's so important for people to see who we are outside of our sport. And there's so many multifaceted and really fascinating people, and we're all different. We all have things to share. So, I really commend what you guys are doing. It's always tough to take that leap of faith, but man, there's just always so many beautiful things that can happen down the road. And, if you never take that, you never get to experience that. So I'm excited to see what's to come for you guys in the future. And I just know our relationship is going to keep getting stronger, and we're going to keep building together and doing incredible things. So it's all love, man. I appreciate you guys.
All love. Pack all family. Love. And JP, we appreciate you being on Next Chapter podcast. When you think about transitions in life and the chapters that you go through, JP's story is a testimony of that. Never give up hope. You have some powerful chapters to write in the future. Never forget that. The best is yet to come. Subscribe to Next Chapter podcast below. Christina, you see it. Subscribe below. Can't thank you guys enough.